The rise of Adolf Hitler to power was based on the ideology of an all-powerful, all-conquering master race. It followed that anything that undermined the health of the Aryan race had to be eradicated. It was not surprising then that it was German doctors who first discovered the link between smoking and cancer. For the Nazis, the abuse of tobacco fitted into a broader ideology of eugenics and racial purity.
The Nazis had this view that your body belonged to the Führer, your body belonged to the nation. You were not supposed to abuse your body because you were really hurting state property when you smoked or when you drank or when you used drugs. And as a result, there was this view that anything you did that was hurting your body was hurting the state.
Hitler's own health was fragile. He consumed an array of medicines and potions for his stomach, bowels, and heart. But he was also a teetotaler and a vegetarian, a lifestyle he thought appropriate for the master race.
You had the Aryan man, and they often looked like these Greek statues. They also wanted to eat right, you know, fiber and fruits and vegetables, everything we say these days about eating healthy. You had these movements in other countries as well, but it wasn't part of state ideology. And when you have a totalitarian, centralized government, it can become part of state policy.
The ideology of the master race demanded super-fit young men and athletic girls. Propaganda films promoted healthy living and outdoor activities in the dramatic landscape of the fatherland. But a healthy nation also meant a broad assault on what German scientists of the time identified as threats to public health.
I think of the Nazi period as this quest for a sanitary utopia, an effort to clean up the air. They wanted clean water. They actually even wanted a healthy workplace. You find the first good studies on the tobacco causation of cancer in the Nazi period, the first studies of asbestos causing lung cancer in the Nazi period, the first studies even of indoor radon causing lung cancer, and many other carcinogens are first identified in the Nazi period.
So it was in Germany in the 1930s that the first serious and systematic attempt was made to establish a link between cancer and smoking.
What you have in the Nazi period is animal experiments that were large-scale, using many animals. You have the development of case control epidemiological methods, that is, methods where you would compare one population that smoked with a very carefully balanced similar population, same age, same race, same health condition, who didn't smoke, and then you would see which had the higher rate of lung cancer, and they found that there was a significantly higher lung cancer rate among the smoking population.
Once the link had been established between cigarette smoking and cancer, it was clear that every effort had to be made to protect the master race from its effects. Safeguarding the purity of the stock was critical. Anything that might endanger the health of the Aryan child was forbidden.
They thought that, especially German women, by smoking, would be reducing the fitness of their offspring. This was viewed as something that was actually a crime against the German fruit of the womb, you might say, and that by smoking you were actually damaging the future of the German race.
Well, that certainly fit in with the eugenic policy, that, you know, if you're going to breed a better man, you want them to be healthy. If smoking is bad for the organism and causes cancer, we don't want to perpetuate that in our race.
Tobacco was attacked as an epidemic, a plague. Along with alcohol, it was a disease of liberal decadence. Smoking was discouraged in the armed forces and banned in Nazi party offices. By 1943, it was illegal for under 18-year-olds to smoke in public. And a year later, smoking was outlawed on city trains and buses. Hitler banned anyone from smoking in his presence, though he had been a smoker himself in his youth. He even attributed the success of the National Socialist Party to his decision to give it up.
He credits the triumph of fascism to his giving up smoking. He apparently smoked until around World War I, where he He says he threw his cigarettes into the Danube and never looked back. And he says if he hadn't given up smoking, he wouldn't have been able to organize the Nazi movement in Germany. So this was something very, very close to his heart.
What's more, on this issue, Hitler was convinced he had the edge over the Allied leaders.
One of the interesting things about the politics of this time is that all three of the fascist leaders, Mussolini, Franco, and Hitler, were at least non-smoking, whereas all three of the Allied leaders, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, were very heavy smokers.
The American people, through their elected representatives in Congress, have determined to wage unremitting warfare against cancer.
This is an American public information film made in 1940. It shows clearly that cancer was a public health issue. It gives advice about how to avoid the disease.
Chronic irritation often influences the appearance of cancer. The chafing of a jagged tooth, the rubbing of the shoe.
But it makes no mention of smoking being a cause of cancer. It wasn't until 1950 that Allied scientists caught up with their German counterparts, and much later, before positive action was taken to deter smoking. The discovery of the link between smoking and cancer was an example of good science being usurped by the Nazis for their own ends. It gave ample ammunition for Nazi propagandists spreading the ideology of the master race. And it was not long before Hitler's propaganda machine was exploiting a new technology that could spread the fascist message more effectively than ever before.
Scores of microphones and cameras were used to photograph Hitler and record his voice so that all of Germany and others throughout the world could receive his message of hate and hypocrisy.
The rise of the Nazi Party in the early 1930s depended in part on terror, but also on the ruthless use of propaganda. Hitler's cold-blooded and calculating propaganda minister was Joseph Goebbels. He had masterminded the presentation of Hitler's anti-Semitic message, using all available technology at his disposal. But soon there would be a new invention that could transform Goebbels' propaganda machine and make it even easier for the Führer to be heard throughout the fatherland. This new and revolutionary technology owed something to an obscure Austrian engineer living in Germany in the years after the First World War. His name was Fritz Fleumer. In 1920s Germany, Fleumer had the bright idea of coating paper with iron powder to make a cheap magnetic audio tape. This paper tape was fragile, but it would replace the existing expensive magnetic solid steel tape and could be edited with a pair of scissors rather than a soldering iron. Fleumer knew he was onto something.
Fritz Fleumer took his invention to Berlin, to AEG, which was one of the leading electronics companies in those days, and they bought the patents and so on from Fleumer and set up in 1932 a team to begin work on das Magnetophon, the magnetic phonograph.
AEG teamed up with the German chemical giant IG Farben to produce the world's first magnetic tape recorder. It would revolutionize sound recording. But when AEG demonstrated their new invention at the Berlin Radio Fair in 1935, it was not quite the sensation they hoped for.
The radio engineers looked at this and said, aha, this is it. Tape would be the ideal medium. We could record on it, we can snip it up, we can glue it or tape it back together and edit the shows to our heart's content. It would be a dream come true. One problem. The original AEG magnetophone shown at the 1935 radio fair sounded terrible.
The fact was that the quality was good enough for speech, for use as a dictation machine. After all, the Nazis used the early magnetophone to listen into and record telephone conversations, but its commercial potential, as AEG recognized, was extremely limited.
they instantly saw that there would be no business based on dictation purposes only. They had to have the possibility and the technical means to recording music. That would make the business.
In 1930,